life, there are moments that we cannot forget, experiences that we never want to repeat. The horror stories below will take you into a world of fear, where mysteries and hauntings are constantly lurking. From mysterious images in the dark to terrifying encounters with strangers, each story is a testament to how sometimes reality is scarier than we imagine. 10. A Night of Terror. Several years ago, on an unforgettable night, I had an experience that made me never dare to return to that place again. When I was 15 years old, after a night of enjoying horror movies with my friends, I decided to sleep over at my best friend's house. My friend's house is located near an area in the process of being demolished, where a row of old houses are being abandoned, preparing to make way for new construction. The area has been fenced off with a series of signs prohibiting entry, and the old houses are all sealed with wooden planks. The doors and windows were all sealed shut, with no way to get inside. But we, with the curiosity of teenagers, decided to walk around this area, hoping to find some interesting things. As we approached the property, we noticed a house with a top-floor window that was not completely sealed. A small opening allowed us to see inside. Fascinated by the mystery of the house, we took a few photos through the opening with our digital camera. When we returned and reviewed the photos, we were shocked to discover something strange in one photo. In the photo taken through the window, an image of a woman wearing a brown raincoat appears. Her skin was very white and her hair was long black, giving off a melancholy look. The strange thing was that we didn't see anyone there when we took photos, and what's more, the windows and doors were completely sealed. Feeling nervous, we returned to the house to check again, and as expected, everything was still completely tied up with no one inside. The photo we took is the only proof of that woman's presence. Her white skin and melancholy eyes make this image unforgettable to us. Since that night, the image of the woman in the photo has always haunted me, making it impossible for me to sleep peacefully. The old building and its sealed walls cannot hide the mysteries that lurk within. And from then on, I never dared to return to that area again, just because of the presence of a sad soul that we accidentally encountered. 9. Rita's Terror, Ghosts from the Past. A few years ago, when Rita was a boy of 11 or 12, his life was turned upside down by an unimaginable incident. Rita is a lovely boy who attracts the attention of many people, including Ayano Ayane, a 17-year-old girl who lives near his house. At first, Ayano is just an acquaintance, but her appearance soon turns into a long, inexplicable nightmare. It all started when Ayano started following Rita constantly, not only in person but also through social networks. Her first messages were casual, such as "Are you safe?" or "Did you sleep well?" Although these messages seemed like mere concerns, Rita couldn't deny that they carried an uneasy feeling. After that, Ayano's messages became more strange and scary. She started sending personal information like "You should eat lunch if you skip meals," or "Your sister is crying, looks hungry." The harassment didn't stop there. Rita decided to temporarily give up her phone and social media, hoping the harassment would stop. However, Ayano's presence did not diminish. One day, when Rita's mother was not at home, Ayano was assigned to look after him and his siblings. At this time, Ayano has become the new babysitter, but her closeness to Rita's mother makes him feel uncomfortable. One day at school, Ayano suddenly appeared and informed Rita that his mother was going abroad for a week. She asked Rita to come home with her after school, saying that his mother had left and he would stay with her. Although Rita felt uneasy, he could not go against his mother's wishes and finally agreed. When Rita arrived at Ayano's house, he felt that the atmosphere here seemed heavy and shady. Ayano is constantly creating bizarre games. She asks Rita to participate in games like pretending to be a family, with her as the wife and Rita as the husband. These games gradually become more strange and scary. Ayano also organizes games like Cops and Robbers, where she blindfolds Rita and makes him sit in a dark room for hours. Sometimes she even left Rita alone in the dark room, while Ayano's giggles echoed from outside the door. For 5 days, Rita lived in fear and tension. Ayano wouldn't let him go out, and he could only sit in front of the TV, with no way to escape. One day, while he was sitting in front of the TV, A strange and scary news appeared on the screen. It was a report of a missing child, Rita herself. He didn't have time to react before the TV suddenly turned off, and Ayano stood behind him with the remote in her hand, her eyes cold and scary. Panic engulfed Rita. He tried to call for help, but Ayano held him tightly in her arms, making him feel like he was trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Finally, when he almost had no strength left, Rita tried to open the window and called for help to get out. Luckily, a couple passing by heard the cries for help and immediately called the police. Police arrived on the scene within the hour and found Rita locked in Ayano's bedroom, her hands tied and blindfolded. The police arrested Ayano, and Rita's mother immediately ran to hug him. Rita was taken to the hospital to check on him and ensure his health, while Ayano was captured and taken away. After that incident, Rita moved to Australia to start a new life, away from Ayano's scary memories and ghosts. However, even though he has left the past, the memories of those horrifying days still haunt him, making him never forget the horror and mystery of Ayano. Every time she heard her name, a coldness and fear arose in Rita's heart. 8. Haunting in the night, a terrifying encounter. About 5 years ago, when I lived in a big city in America, my life revolved around quiet evenings when the streets were silent. As a nocturnal person, I often feel bored when my roommate, who doesn't have this habit, goes to bed early. To kill time and escape the monotony, I often walk alone at night. Those walks never made me feel uneasy. I used to joke that even the drug dealers in the city were polite and gentle. But everything changed in a terrifying way one fateful night. It was a Wednesday between 1:00 and 2:00 in the morning. The park near where I live is usually a deserted place at late hours, with little traffic and almost no one walking. I was walking along the street near the park, where there were regular police patrols, but at the time it was very quiet. That night, the air felt especially empty, just me and the overwhelming silence. As I walked down a side street back to my apartment, I saw him for the first time. At the end of the street, the shadow of a man is dancing. His dance was inexplicably strange, like a waltz but with repetitive, bumpy steps. He danced steadily, but his movements seemed stiff and unnatural. Looking at the oddness of the dance, I guessed that he was probably drunk, so I decided to move further out of his path. As I approached, I noticed how strange his grace was. He was very tall and thin, wearing old, worn, faded clothes. As I got closer, I could see his face clearly. His eyes were wide open, but not looking forward, but up at the sky, as if looking at something invisible. His smile was unnaturally wide, stretching from ear to ear, like a creepy smile from a caricature. His presence made me feel cold. I decided to cross the street before he got closer. As I crossed the empty street, I glanced back and saw that he had stopped dancing. He stood on one leg, completely parallel to me. Although he remained standing still, the smile on his face did not change, and his eyes still looked up at the sky. With each passing second, the feeling of fear inside me increased more and more. I turned away, trying to continue walking forward. But when I turned to look again, he had disappeared from where he was standing before. I felt a little reassured, but that peace of mind didn't last. When I realized he had crossed the street and was now standing slightly bent over, his face still facing me, I felt the blood in my body stop. Even though the faint light from the street lamp wasn't enough to make out his figure, I had the feeling that he was continuing to observe me. My heart clenched in extreme fear. I stood still, unable to move, only staring at him. Suddenly, he started moving towards me again. This time, his dance was no longer slow. He moved with quick hops, almost like a cartoon character sneaking closer. His every step is like a ghostly shadow, moving quickly and hauntingly. I felt like I was frozen, unable to do anything but watch. I wanted to scream, run away, or pull out the pepper spray, but my body didn't seem to listen to my brain's commands. I just stood there, my limbs shaking as he approached. The smile on his face remained unchanged, as if he was searching for something. When I finally found my phone, I tried to type in the number and shouted, "What do you want ___?" My voice rang out, lost and panicked, like a scream in the night. Although I wasn't sure if he could hear my fear or not, I could sense the badness in my voice. He didn't react, just stood there, smiling that weird smile. When I felt the crisis reach its peak, he started to turn his back and continued to dance. I didn't dare turn my back on him anymore. I could only watch him walk away until he was almost out of sight. But the most terrifying thing is not over yet. When I realized that he was no longer moving, I turned around and saw his silhouette growing larger and larger. He turned back towards me, and this time he was running. I couldn't take it anymore and started to run away. I ran through the side road, back to the main road with better lighting and more traffic. While running, I kept glancing behind me, always afraid that he would reappear. When I looked back and saw he was nowhere to be seen, I felt a little reassured. I continued running home, still feeling panic and fear. I lived in that city for another 6 months, and during that time, I never dared to go out for a walk at night. That man's face always haunts me. He was not drunk, not on drugs, but looked completely crazy. It was an unimaginably horrifying thing to witness. Every time I think about that night, the feeling of fear and obsession rises inside me, never letting go. 7. House of Horrors. In the mid-80s, my mother worked as a cleaner in Australia. She often takes jobs from outlying suburbs and occasionally from remote rural areas, where she leaves business cards at local stores and relies on word-of-mouth referrals. One day, she received a call from a woman in her 60s. This woman asked my mother to clean out her old house on a farm. What's notable is that she asked my mother not to come directly to her and just leave the key under the doormat in front of the door. Even though she found this a bit strange, my mother still agreed because she was a seemingly rich person and promised to pay more than usual. On that Monday morning, my mother came to the house. The house is isolated in the middle of a large, remote and deserted area, creating a terrifyingly quiet space. The driveway to the house was long and narrow, leading through an area with no trace of life, making my mother feel like she was entering a deserted land. She found the key and opened the door, entering the house. A cold and gloomy feeling overwhelmed her when she entered, as if the house had been abandoned long ago. My mother started cleaning, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease in her heart. After about an hour, when the cleaning job was almost complete, Mom noticed the back door was tightly closed, even though she was told no one was home. Her fear increased, and my mother stood still in the kitchen, feeling like something was going wrong. She felt like someone was watching her from afar, even though there was no other noise. Gradually, my mother decided to continue working, but the feeling of insecurity did not go away. She walked up the hallway and into the bedroom. When she opened the bedroom door, my mother was shocked by a horrifying scene. In the bedroom, on the bed, are a series of black and white photos. These photos are not simply images of my mother, they are clear, detailed photos of her in different situations. Some of the photos were of my mother while she was cleaning at our house, while others were moments in which she had no idea she was being photographed. There were photos of my mother through the window, through the fence, even while she was walking in the area. My mother felt cold, her blood seemed to freeze. She felt like she was being watched every second. Her breathing became rapid, and she no longer had the strength to continue her work. She hurriedly called the police from her home phone, but was in no mood to continue cleaning. Immediately, she left everything behind and drove out of the area, feeling like she was being hunted. When the police arrived, they inspected the house and searched for signs of an intruder, but ultimately only confirmed that it was a break-in without any further concrete evidence. They couldn't find any clues about the mysterious woman or why the photos were there. My mother felt completely hopeless and scared, unable to understand the reason behind all that had happened. Finally, my mother and her family decided to move to a new town, leaving the house and all the scary memories behind. However, the memory of that house and the strange photos still haunt my mother, like a ghost that never leaves. Every time I think about that house, my mother still feels cold and the fear never goes away. 6. The nightmare under the bed. About a year and a half ago, I had just moved into my first apartment, a big turning point in my life. While moving and organizing, I encountered a haunting situation that still makes me unable to forget. My apartment has a door that automatically locks when closed, and that day I decided to go to the apartment complex's entrance to get the mail. When I returned to the apartment, it was dark, and the light from the hallways didn't seem to be enough to make me feel secure. I sat on the bed, opening mail and talking on the phone with a friend, while unintentionally I dropped my phone on the floor and it rolled under the bed. To get my phone back, I lied face down on the floor and reached under the bed. When I looked down, I saw a pair of eyes staring up at me. Those pupils were unmistakable, and I felt a shiver down my spine. I feel like my heart is beating so hard that I can't control it. I wanted to scream, but panic prevented me from making a sound. The person under the bed was still lying with his back to me, his head resting on his chest, so I couldn't see his face clearly. But that terrible feeling made me feel like I was petrified. For a short period of time, I felt completely out of control. I struggled to concentrate while a million chaotic thoughts raced through my head. I quickly picked up the phone and mumbled an apology, trying to stay calm. "Sorry, I dropped the phone. I'll go take a shower and call you right back." With trepidation, I hurried into the bathroom next to the bed, locked the door, and turned on the shower to cover the noise. I clung to the wall, trying not to make a sound. And once it felt a little quieter, I opened the window and jumped out. I called the police from outside, crouched behind a wall of cars, and looked toward the open bathroom window and the apartment door. The summer night was cold and quiet, with only faint light from the street lamps in the distance. My heart beat faster as I stared at the apartment, hoping that nothing bad would happen. A short time later, my friend arrived and waited with me across the street. The police arrived quickly, and I gave them the keys. They entered the apartment, and a moment later, I saw two policemen come out, hugging a thin, tired man. His eyes looked crazy and full of fear, but he didn't try to run away. One of the policemen stood next to me and comforted me, while the other policeman searched the apartment. When I was informed of the situation, I learned that the man had been standing outside my bathroom door with a kitchen knife, waiting for me to come out. Somehow, he snuck into the apartment when I went to get the mail and hid under the bed. Police said he was homeless and had psychological problems. After being taken away, he was transferred to a mental hospital for treatment. This incident left a deep mental scar on me. The feeling of being watched and the invasion of my personal space never fades. The memory of those eyes still haunts me like a never-ending nightmare. 5. Horrifying memories. When I was 21 years old, my girlfriend and I were resting in my family's mobile home. It was a cold winter night with a fierce snowstorm raging outside. We were curled up on the cozy couch near the fireplace, watching a late-night TV show in the dim light of the lamp. Around us, the dense forest was covered in a thick layer of snow, and all that separated us from the outside world was an old wooden door whose lock had long ago broken. To make sure the door wouldn't be opened, my grandfather placed several large cinder blocks as a barrier. We were enjoying the warmth of the house when my girlfriend started shaking me, her voice shaking. I heard something outside. I tried to reassure her that it was probably just a deer or a bear wandering through the snow. But as 5 minutes passed and the strange sound continued, her anxiety increased. I started to feel uneasy, and when I turned off the TV, I noticed a strange sound coming from the small shed in the backyard where the lawn mower was located. These noises do not sound like animal noises. They appear to be intentional noises. My girlfriend urged me to get tested, but I told her not to panic. I decided to open the curtains on the backyard window and look outside. What I saw left me cold. Clear human footprints in the snow leading from the front into the backyard. They weren't animal prints, but shoe prints, and they were leading toward the backyard window. I turned on the porch light and saw a strange man, dressed in black and wearing a mask, standing opposite the window. Even though it was dark outside, I could still see the man's outline through the window, and fear hit me like a wave. I felt like everything around me was shrinking, and those moments lasted forever. Immediately, I closed the curtains and quickly told my girlfriend to hide in the bedroom and not make a sound. In a panic, I took my grandfather's shotgun out of the closet and pushed cinder blocks and other heavy objects to form a barricade at the main door. I turned off all the lights and closed the curtains. Then we retreated to a dark corner of the bedroom. The pounding on the door became more and more violent, accompanied by the sound of wood cracking and the sound of a blizzard whistling through the cracks. These sounds make me feel like I'm living in a never-ending nightmare. We sat there, nervous, waiting, listening to the constant pounding on the door. After several long hours, the pounding on the door began to subside, then suddenly stop. I didn't dare move, just sat there with the gun next to me, waiting for any sign of danger. The next morning, the first light of the sun peeked through the gaps in the curtains. We quickly packed up our things and left the mobile home. However, as I checked my surroundings, I saw a new set of footprints leading from the front yard window deep into the woods. These footprints were new, clearly not ours. My grandparents went back to the house to check, but saw no signs of break-in or loss. They just said that all was well and nothing was disturbed. However, I cannot forget the image of that man and the scary sounds of that night. The haunting from that night made me never return to the mobile home again. It was a horrifying memory, a fear forever imprinted in my mind. 4. The intruder. When my grandmother was alive, I often walked down the block to help her with odd jobs. One day, as usual, I walked to her house. This time, the first thing that made me feel wrong was that when I arrived, I found the front door unlocked. My grandmother is a very careful person and always locks the door tightly, so this lack of care really worries me. As I walked inside, I heard sounds from upstairs, the opening and closing of drawers and cabinets. I knew my grandmother often did these jobs, so I didn't have any doubts. I called to her from downstairs, and when I was about 5 feet from her bedroom door, she suddenly slammed the door shut. I knocked on the door, asking if she was okay, but only received silence. At that exact moment, my cell phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw that it was my grandmother's phone number. I felt a cold sensation run down my spine when my grandmother was on the line, her panicked voice telling me not to come to her house that day. She said she was on her way to the seniors club and asked me not to enter the house. I felt like my heart stopped beating when I heard these words. I quickly hung up but didn't say another word. I clearly understand what's going on. I pretended to be lost and told my grandmother that I was going downstairs and went straight to the kitchen to get a knife. When I turned around to call 911, I didn't hear a sound from the bedroom. Feelings of nervousness and fear rose as I stood outside, waiting. When the police arrived, they burst into the bedroom. The loud and sudden sound of gunfire startled me. I couldn't believe what was happening when the paramedics arrived and chased the intruder out. When everything calmed down, I realized the intruder's face was my grandmother's neighbor. He knew my grandmother left the house and took this opportunity to break in and look for jewelry. When police searched the bedroom, they found him hiding next to the door, holding a large knife. If I hadn't backed away and called the police in time, I probably would have fallen into the hands of that intruder. The feeling of fear and insecurity still haunts me every time I think about that incident. My actions saved not only me but also my grandmother from a terrible danger. 3. Haunting memories. One of the most haunting memories of my life is what happened one dark evening when my wife and I were returning home from a dinner out. As we stepped out of the car, an uneasy feeling overtook me immediately. The front door leading into our house was wide open. I didn't say anything to my wife, just told her to stay outside while I rushed inside. Stepping inside, I hurried upstairs to my wife's bedroom, where I hid the shotgun. I loaded my gun and started checking each room on the floor. My heart beat fast. I felt like every little noise in the house became scary. I checked every corner, not missing any room, but there was no sign of anyone else's presence. After checking the upper floor, I continued down to the main floor, then to the basement. Everything was quiet. No signs of intrusion, no items moved or missing. I called the police, and when they arrived, I told them the details of the incident. They started investigating again from the rooms upstairs, then down to the basement. But the results were the same as I had seen, nothing unusual. We closed the door as we left the house, and the police left after finding no trace of the burglary. I felt anxiety and doubt welling up inside me. My wife, feeling uneasy and worried, became tired. I tried to reassure her, assuring her that if anyone broke into the house, they would have left as soon as they heard the noise. Finally, after many hours of tossing and turning in bed, I fell asleep, but my sleep was interrupted immediately by my wife's screams. I woke up and saw her staring intently towards the wardrobe. I immediately felt like I was punched in the face with fear. I realized at that moment I had forgotten to check a second closet. When I walked to the closet, I opened the door and saw a horrifying moment. A man stealthily poked his head out from inside before quickly closing the door. I readied the handgun, my hands shaking, and pointed the gun in the direction of the closet, preparing to face the intruder. I yelled for him to get out. The closet door opened slowly, but instead of obeying my command, the man rushed out of the closet at a frantic pace, racing straight toward the front door of the house. I felt my body freeze, partly from shock and partly from anger. I could have shot him, but I didn't have time to react right away. The man was not caught, and I was worried that he had escaped without being caught. The presence of that shotgun saved us from a terrible end. The memory of that moment still haunts me. I know that without timely preparation and quick thinking, the outcome could have been different, and the dream of a peaceful night would have been replaced by a terrifying nightmare. 2. Strange sound. About a year ago, when I was still living under my parents' roof, I started experiencing strange, inexplicable phenomena, especially in my bedroom. Late one night, as I lay awake in bed, an eerie sound broke the silence of the room. I heard a creaking sound, soft but continuous, coming from the other side of the bedroom. I slowly sat up and realized that my closet door had opened a little. I can't explain why, but even though I was 26 years old, I still felt a stupid fear, and out of habit I checked my closet. Even though I knew no one was there, the closet door was strangely open, but there was nothing unusual inside. I closed the door and went back to bed, trying to shake off the feeling of insecurity rising in my heart. However, that night, the rattling sound came from above the ceiling. This sound is not like the normal noise of an air duct, but sounds like something is moving inside. Even though the sound stopped quickly, I still couldn't get rid of the anxiety. The next morning, I told my dad about the sound in the attic, but to my annoyance, he didn't seem interested or didn't believe me. I lay in bed, thinking about the strangeness of the night before, and suddenly the closet door creaked open again. This time, the sound really broke the silence in a creepy way. I knew for certain that the door was sealed, and there was no way for it to open without someone deliberately twisting the doorknob. I carefully checked the inside of the closet again, but no one was hiding there. The wardrobe is a large cupboard, and there is no place where someone can hide. I tried to console myself that maybe the door handle was broken or there was some reasonable reason, but the feeling of fear still did not leave me. That night, the rattling noises from the attic started again, just like what happened the night before. The next morning, I convinced my dad to check my closet door. He quickly determined that the door was fine when closed, with no signs of it coming loose from its latch. He thought that maybe I had forgotten to close the door, or that it had been opened while daydreaming. I knew I couldn't forget that night, but my father's answer didn't make me feel any better. Another night, I decided to sit up and wait for it to happen again. As soon as the closet door began to creak open, I anxiously waited for sounds from the ceiling, but there was only a long silence. I turned on the light and looked up at the vent in the room, and then I saw something I couldn't believe: 2 pairs of wide eyes staring down from the vent. This scene made me feel like my heart stopped beating. I screamed at the top of my lungs, and my parents burst into the room asking me if anything was wrong. I explained everything to them, but they just looked at each other as if I was completely crazy. They didn't believe me and thought it was just a nightmare or extreme fatigue. They also started explaining that staying up late could cause hallucinations. Still, to this day, I know I never imagined it. Those nights really happened, and what I saw was not in my imagination. I have never believed in paranormal phenomena, but those 3 nights left an indelible mark on me. There is no other explanation for those strange events, and I still live in fear of the inexplicable. 1. Strange objects. About a week ago, my family and I had a memorable afternoon at the small lake behind our house. This lake, just a quarter mile from our house, has become a favorite of my children. Every time we go there, the air is fresh. The scenery is peaceful, like a private beach that we can enjoy. That day it was sunny and warm. We spread out beach chairs on the sand and enjoyed snacks and fun conversations. Our two children, a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, were very excited to jump into the water and play. My wife and I sat comfortably in beach chairs, enjoying the sunlight shining on the sparkling water. However, when the sun begins to set, I remind my children not to go too far. They were still playing happily, not paying any attention to my reminder. When it started to get dark, my wife felt tired and decided to return home, leaving me with the children. I agreed to stay a little longer because I felt the children were still very happy playing. But as the sun's light gradually faded, I felt worried when I saw that my children had gone quite far from the shore. I called them to come closer, but they didn't hear me. I stood up and walked towards the shore. As I approached my children, I saw a strange object in the water. The object was a black, round mass, and it was moving in the direction of my children. Feeling anxious, I quickly ran into the water and called my children to return closer to shore. As my children got closer, I pulled them out of the water, feeling a strong urge to ensure their safety. When I turned around, the water had calmed down, and the black object had disappeared without a trace. My children were confused by my anxiety, and I quickly took them to shore, telling them it was time to go home. When I got home, I couldn't shake the feeling of insecurity. Dinner was prepared, but I couldn't eat well. My wife noticed the worry on my face and asked me what was wrong. I decided not to share what I saw, just saying I was a little tired. After dinner was over, I felt the need to return to the lake to learn more about that strange object. As night fell, I grabbed my flashlight and headed back to the lake, feeling increasingly nervous. The surface of the lake was in darkness, and the surrounding air became silent, as if it was waiting for something. I shined my flashlight across the water, hoping to find traces of the object. Suddenly, I heard a loud splash, as if something was emerging from the water. The sound of splashing water made me feel nervous and scared. As I shined my flashlight toward the sound, I saw a shadowy figure standing on the water. That figure had long, black hair that fell down to obscure its face, making it impossible for me to identify it. It wasn't a creature I could recognize, but rather a strange shape, as if it was waiting for something. Fear overwhelmed me. I dropped the flashlight and ran like crazy back home, my heart pounding. As I closed the door behind me, I felt like someone was watching me from the shadows. I didn't dare tell anyone what I had seen, but the feeling of anxiety did not let me go. That lake is almost right behind my window, and I can't shake the fear that that strange shadow might be lurking, watching me right from the window as I write these words. The feeling of confusion and fear kept clinging to me, as if the lake was no longer a peaceful place, but had become a land of inexplicable things. These stories are not only scary memories, but also lessons in vigilance and safety awareness. When we are faced with strange and scary things, it is important to remember that sometimes curiosity can lead to unforeseen outcomes. Always keep yourself and those around you safe. And if you feel like something is wrong, don't hesitate to seek help. Hopefully, these stories will make you reflect and be more careful in everyday life.